You have made it to LO3, which is about cell respiration. As always, just a quick review of what we've already talked about. Remember that everything needs energy in the form of glucose and ATP. Autotrophs are allowed to make their own glucose via photosynthesis, or I briefly mentioned chemosynthesis. There are two main steps, the light reactions and then the dark reactions. The reactants are carbon dioxide, water, and light. As a result of photosynthesis, your products are oxygen and glucose. Today we are looking at how consumers use the glucose for ATP. And just a side note, producers do this too. So plants do photosynthesis and respiration so they can use the sugar that they make right away for energy. We can only do respiration. Before we begin, here's the equation for photosynthesis. Energy plus carbon dioxide plus water yields sugar and oxygen. Here's respiration. Sugar plus oxygen yields carbon dioxide plus water plus energy in the form of ATP. What do you notice? You should see that they're almost the same thing. They are flipped. The only big difference is that the energy for photosynthesis is light. The energy that we get out of respiration is ATP. So this is cyclical. It's a cycle. Photosynthesis is made by autotrophs in a chloroplast, makes organic compounds such as sugar and oxygen, which are consumed by cellular respiration. Autotrophs and heterotrophs do this in mitochondria. We're going to release carbon dioxide and water, which plants use for photosynthesis, and that just keeps going around and around and around. Definition of cell respiration, the process in which cells break down organic compounds, sugar, to make ATP. Side note, you don't need to eat a whole bunch of candy, sugar, to do this. All other foods in your body can be converted into glucose and broken down that way. So not just sugar. I shouldn't say all other compounds either. It's any carbohydrate can be broken down into the simplest glucose sugar form. This happens in mitochondria. So again, here's your equation. Sugar plus 6 oxygen gives you 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 waters plus energy. And the numbers are just there to balance the equation. If you take chemistry, you'll learn about how to balance equations later on. Reactants, we're putting in sugar and oxygen. So we breathe in oxygen, we eat food. As a result, we get water. Think how much you get rid of water-wise. Sweat, pee. That's water release. That's a product of metabolizing food. We also breathe out carbon dioxide, and we end up with energy. The 3 basic steps we're going to cover: glycolysis, the Krebs cycle. Now, photosynthesis, we had the Kelvin cycle, so you need to keep these two straight. And the third is the electron transport chain, or the ETC. Each stage captures a little bit of ATP. 2 terms before we begin. You need to know the difference. If something is aerobic, oxygen is needed. If oxygen isn't there, this doesn't happen. The Krebs cycle and the ETC, you will see, require oxygen. Anaerobic means oxygen isn't needed. The step will happen whether oxygen is there or not. Glycolysis and fermentation, as you will see, are these 2 things. So step 1, you eat some food. Your body digests it. Those digested pieces go into your blood and then absorbed into your cells, and then it makes it to your mitochondria so we can start making ATP. Glycolysis is step 1. We do not need oxygen to do this. So this will happen whether you have oxygen there or not. It's anaerobic. Basically what happens here, glucose, when it gets into your cells and the mitochondria, is broken into 2 what are called pyruvic acid molecules. We make NADH in order to store electrons. This is the dump truck molecule of cell respiration. In photosynthesis, we had NADPH. Now it's just NADH. And as a result, we get 2 ATP. You don't need to know all the crazy steps. If you take cell bio in college, you will. But this is all I need you to know. Just a side note, your body requires a ton of ATP. You use about 1 million ATP per second. There's about 1 trillion cells in your body. So this is how much ATP is used per second. Ridiculous. So this needs to be an efficient process. Step 2 is the Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle does require oxygen. It is aerobic. We take the pyruvic acid from glycolysis and we break it into carbon dioxide, and that's what you breathe out. It's a byproduct. We make more of those dump truck molecules, that NADH, to take electrons and drive it to the ETC for later. As a result of this step, we get 2 ATP. So right now, we're only sitting on 4 ATP. That's not a lot. Our dump truck, NADH, drives to part 3, the electron transport chain, which does require oxygen. We drop off the NADH and the electrons. The electrons go through this series of proteins. It's a long process, learning what happens in each step. Again, you don't need to know it. Just realize that lots of chemical reactions happen here, and we make 32 ATP. Yeah, so it's a lot more, but still not quite enough for everything that goes on in your body. As a total, from cell respiration, we make 36 ATP for every 1 glucose molecule that comes in. However, there's another problem. Only 38% of that energy is available for use. A lot of it's lost as heat. It's a metabolic process in your body. So this needs to be happening all the time, all over the place in all your cells in order for you to survive. This is happening right now in every cell of your body. It's crazy. 2 quick review questions. What's the dump truck for respiration? What's the dump truck for photosynthesis? Hopefully you said NADH and NADPH. I like to remember there's a P in here for photosynthesis. That's not really what it stands for, but it helps me remember. Now, if after glycolysis we don't have oxygen, we go a different pathway. Instead of going through the Krebs cycle, we go through fermentation. We don't make ATP. This process is just to keep recycling NADH, because if that dump truck got full of electrons and it never got dumped off, well, you'd be in trouble. You would die because fermentation and everything else would stop. So our 2 kinds. Lactic acid fermentation happens in you. If you exercise a lot, your body's not getting oxygen fast enough, so your body makes lactic acid as a byproduct as it's recycling NADH. This is that burning sensation in your muscles. It causes cramping and pain, and it's not very nice. Alcoholic fermentation, you don't do this. It happens in yeast and some other organisms. They basically go through this process and make carbon dioxide, which allows bread to rise, the bubbles in beer, etc. So here's just a visual. Okay, we go through glycolysis, we bring in that glucose, we start to break it down. If there is oxygen, we go through aerobic respiration, the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain. If not, we go fermentation route. Fermentation, there's 2 possible pathways depending on what kind of organism you are. So here's just a review. Remember, these are cyclical. Photosynthesis takes in the sun, makes sugar and oxygen. Sugar and oxygen are needed by mitochondria to make ATP. As a result, mitochondria makes water, carbon dioxide, which is needed for photosynthesis. The next step is going to be the comparison chart at the end of your note packet. You also have a video quiz to take. It doesn't matter which one you do first, but the chart you're going to conference with me once you finish it, and then refer to your note packet for your further instructions.